Why did my husband walk out of that crowded restaurant, leaving everyone silent and staring? How could one simple request, switching seats so my guy friend could be next to me, spark the unraveling of my carefully managed double life? I never imagined that a single act of disrespect would trigger the end. But as the legal documents landed on my doorstep, I realized there's no hiding when the truth comes out. The reservation was for 8 people at Romano's, the trendy Italian place downtown where everyone from our social circle went to see and be seen. I had orchestrated this dinner perfectly. Ethan and I, my sister Corinne, and her husband Brad, our friends Mike and Jessica, plus Sasha and her new boyfriend. But most importantly, Jamie would be there. Jamie Coulter, my personal trainer turned close friend, had become the bright spot in my otherwise mundane existence. At 34, he was everything Ethan wasn't: spontaneous, fun, and he actually listened when I talked. Sure, we'd been getting closer over the past few months, but it was innocent, mostly. "Lysandra, you look amazing tonight," Jamie said as we gathered outside the restaurant. His hand lingered on my lower back as he spoke, and I felt that familiar flutter of excitement. Ethan stood beside me, adjusting his tie nervously. At 39, my husband had settled into a comfortable routine of work, home, and weekend yard work. He was reliable, responsible, and utterly predictable. Everything I used to think I wanted. "Thanks, Jamie." "You clean up pretty well yourself," I replied, letting my fingers brush his arm as we walked inside. The hostess led us to our reserved table, a large round booth in the center of the dining room. Perfect for conversation, perfect for being seen. I watched as everyone settled in, noting with satisfaction that several acquaintances from around town were already seated at nearby tables. "Lysandra, why don't you sit here between Ethan and me?" Corinne suggested, patting the seat beside her. But I had other plans. I glanced around the table, calculating the seating arrangement. Ethan had automatically taken the seat next to where I was standing, leaving Jamie across the table between Mike and Jessica. This wouldn't do at all. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying that sweet tone I'd perfected over the years. "Ethan, honey, would you mind switching with Jamie? I'd love to catch up with him about our new workout routine." The table went quiet for just a moment. I could feel everyone's eyes on us, but I kept my smile bright and innocent. This was perfectly reasonable. Friends catching up over dinner. Ethan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm fine where I am, Lysandra." "Oh, come on," I laughed, placing my hand on his shoulder. "Don't be such a stick in the mud. Jamie and I barely got to talk at the gym today because it was so busy. Right, Jamie?" Jamie shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I mean, we could just talk across the table." "Nonsense," I said, my voice getting slightly firmer. "Ethan, please, it's just dinner. You're acting like I'm asking you to give up your firstborn." Sasha giggled from across the table. "Come on, Ethan, live a little. It's not like Lysandra's going to run away with Jamie or anything." The comment hung in the air, and I felt heat creep up my neck. But I forced another laugh. "Exactly. We're all adults here." "Ethan, you're being ridiculous." My husband's face had gone completely stone-faced. He looked at me for a long moment, then at Jamie, then back at me. The entire restaurant seemed to fade into background noise as we stared at each other. "You want me to move so your friend can sit next to my wife?" Ethan said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not a big deal," I insisted, but something in his tone made my stomach clench. "You're making this weird when it doesn't have to be." Margaret, Ethan's mother, had been unusually quiet since we sat down. Now she cleared her throat softly. "Perhaps we should just order our drinks and—" "No," I interrupted, my frustration bubbling over. "I'm tired of walking on eggshells around Ethan's jealousy. Jamie is my friend. I'm allowed to have friends. I'm allowed to sit next to my friends at dinner." The words came out sharper than I intended, and I could see the shock register on several faces around the table. But I was committed now. I couldn't back down without looking foolish. This is about respect, Lysandra, Ethan said quietly, and you're asking me to disrespect myself in front of our family and friends. I'm asking you to not be controlling, I shot back. I'm asking you to trust me, but apparently that's too much to ask from my own husband. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. I could hear the clinking of glasses and conversation from other tables, the normal sounds of a busy restaurant continuing around our frozen tableau. Finally, Ethan stood up slowly. He pulled out his wallet, placed a $50 bill on the table, and looked directly at me. "Enjoy your dinner," he said simply. Then he walked away. I sat there, my mouth slightly open, watching my husband's retreating figure disappear through the restaurant's front door. The entire table sat in stunned silence. "Well," I said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to my own ears, "I guess that settles the seating arrangement." But as Jamie reluctantly moved to sit beside me, I noticed he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. And when I looked around the table, I saw expressions ranging from uncomfortable to disapproving staring back at me. For the first time that evening, I wondered if I had miscalculated. The dinner continued, but the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Conversations felt forced, and I caught people glancing toward the door, where Ethan had made his exit. I spent the rest of the meal trying to salvage the situation, making jokes about dramatic husbands and typical male ego, but my heart wasn't in it. Jamie barely spoke to me for the remainder of the evening, and when we said our goodbyes in the parking lot, he gave me a quick, awkward hug and mumbled something about having an early morning client. The drive home was torture. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my mind racing with justifications and explanations. Ethan was being ridiculous. I had done nothing wrong. Friends sit together at dinner all the time. He was the one making it weird with his jealousy and possessiveness. But deep down, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, I had pushed too far this time. I found Ethan in our bedroom when I got home, sitting on the edge of the bed still wearing his dress shirt and slacks. He looked up when I entered, but didn't say anything. "That was quite a performance tonight," I said, hanging my purse on the dresser with more force than necessary. "Really mature, walking out like that." Ethan continued staring at me with those steady brown eyes that had once made me feel safe and loved. Now they just made me feel exposed. "Are you sleeping with him?" he asked quietly. The question hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "No. Ethan, how could you even ask me that?" "Because my wife just humiliated me in front of our family and friends so she could sit next to another man," he said, his voice still eerily calm. "Because you've been spending more time at that gym than at home. Because you light up when you talk about Jamie in a way you haven't when talking about me in years." I felt tears spring to my eyes, not from sadness, but from frustration and anger. So now I'm not allowed to have friends. I'm not allowed to be happy. I work hard all week, Ethan. I deserve to have some fun in my life. With him? With my friend. Yes. Ethan stood up slowly and walked to our dresser. He pulled out a pair of pajamas and headed toward the bathroom. At the doorway, he paused. "I've never asked you not to have friends, Lysandra, but I am asking you to think about how your behavior tonight looked to everyone at that table. Think about what you were really asking me to do." He closed the bathroom door, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my anger. I grabbed my phone and immediately opened Instagram. If Ethan wanted to make this about public perception, then I'd control the narrative. I posted a photo from earlier in the evening, me looking radiant in my new dress, with the caption, "Some people can't handle a confident woman having fun with friends. Living my beast life, no regrets." Within minutes, likes and supportive comments started pouring in. Sasha was the first to respond. "You looked amazing tonight. Some men are just insecure." I felt a surge of vindication. See, my friends understood. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't wrong. But as I scrolled through the responses, I noticed something troubling. Several of our mutual friends, people who had been at dinner tonight, weren't liking or commenting. And worse, I could see that some of them had been active on social media since dinner ended. I switched over to my messages and started texting the people who had been at dinner, trying to get ahead of whatever narrative might be forming. Hey, thanks for a fun dinner tonight. Sorry Ethan was being such a drama queen. You know how men get when their ego is bruised. I sent variations of this message to everyone except Margaret, who I knew would just lecture me, and Jamie, who seemed to be avoiding me. Corinne responded first. Liz, maybe you should talk to Ethan. He seemed really hurt. Hurt? I stared at the message in disbelief. He was hurt? What about me? What about being married to someone who didn't trust me, who tried to control who I could sit next to at dinner? I typed back, he's being ridiculous. I asked him to switch seats, not donate a kidney. If he can't handle me having male friends, that's his problem to work through. The 3 dots indicating she was typing appeared and disappeared several times before she finally responded. Maybe just tone it down a little, for Isla's sake. Isla. Our 7-year-old daughter was spending the night at Margaret's house, which was probably for the best given the tension in our home right now. But the mention of her name made my chest tighten with guilt I didn't want to acknowledge. I was crafting a response to Corinne when my phone buzzed with a notification from an unknown number. A message request on Instagram from an account with no profile picture. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it and felt my blood run cold. It was a photo, grainy and taken from a distance, but unmistakably me and Jamie at the gym. We were standing close together by the weight rack, his hand on my waist, both of us laughing. It looked intimate, more intimate than I remembered the moment feeling. The message below the photo was short. Interesting friendship. Wonder what your husband thinks about this. My hands were shaking as I screenshot the message and immediately blocked the account. Who had taken this? Who was watching me? And more importantly, what else did they have? I spent the next hour going through my social media accounts, deleting photos and comments that might be misconstrued. I unfriended people I didn't know well, changed my privacy settings, and tried to remember every interaction Jamie and I had in public. By the time Ethan came out of the bathroom, I was in full panic mode, though I tried to hide it. Everything okay? He asked, noticing me hunched over my phone. Fine, I said quickly, closing the apps. Just catching up on messages from tonight. He nodded and got into bed, turning away from me without saying goodnight. As I lay there in the dark, listening to his breathing, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to fall apart. But I pushed that thought away. I had done nothing wrong, nothing that couldn't be explained or justified. I was a good wife, a good mother, a good person who deserved to have friends and fun in her life. I just needed to be more careful about appearances. The next morning brought an uncomfortable silence that stretched through breakfast and lingered as Ethan left for work. He kissed my forehead, a perfunctory gesture that felt more like habit than affection, and mumbled something about picking up Isla from his mother's house after work. I threw myself into my routine at the logistics firm where I worked as an HR manager, hoping that the familiar environment would help me regain my equilibrium. But even at work, I couldn't escape the feeling that people were looking at me differently. How was dinner last night? Asked Rebecca from accounting as we passed in the hallway. Fine, I replied, but something in her tone made me pause. Why? Oh, no reason. I just saw some posts on social media. Looked like fun. She walked away before I could respond, leaving me to wonder exactly what she had seen and what conclusions she was drawing. By lunchtime, I couldn't concentrate on anything. I decided to head to the gym for a workout and maybe to talk to Jamie about the anonymous message. He would know what to do, how to handle this situation. But when I arrived at the fitness center, Jamie was conspicuously distant. He gave me a polite nod when I walked in, but none of his usual enthusiasm or attention. When I approached him during a break between his clients, he glanced around nervously. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual. Crazy dinner last night, right? Yeah, about that, Jamie said, not quite meeting my eyes. Maybe we should cool it for a while. I don't want to cause problems in your marriage. The rejection stung more than I expected. You're not causing problems. Ethan is just being insecure. This will blow over. Lysandra, the way he looked at me when he left. Jamie shook his head. I've seen that look before. I don't need that kind of drama in my life. What drama? We're friends. Are we? He finally looked directly at me, and I saw something in his expression that made my stomach drop. Because last night felt like more than friendship. And if I'm being honest, it's been feeling like more than friendship for a while now. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come, because he was right. Somewhere along the way, my innocent friendship with Jamie had become something else, something I hadn't been willing to name or acknowledge, even to myself. I think you should focus on your family, Jamie continued gently. Figure out what you really want before someone gets hurt. He walked away to help another client, leaving me standing alone in the middle of the gym floor. I completed a half-hearted workout and drove home, feeling more unsettled than ever. That evening, Ethan returned with Isla, who ran to me with her usual enthusiasm. But even our 7-year-old seemed to sense the tension in the house. Daddy seemed sad at Grandma's house, she said as I helped her with her homework. Are you and Daddy fighting? No, sweetheart, I lied smoothly. Daddy's just tired from work. Everything's fine. But everything wasn't fine, and it was about to get much worse. Over the next few days, I noticed subtle changes in our social circle. Invitations that usually came my way seemed to dry up. Group chats that I had been part of went quiet. When I ran into Jessica at the grocery store, she was polite but distant, cutting our conversation short with an excuse about being late for an appointment. The final straw came on Thursday evening, when I discovered that several of our friends had gotten together for drinks without inviting us. I only found out because Sasha posted photos on Instagram, then quickly deleted them when she realized I had seen them. I called her immediately. Oh, hey Lysandra, she said, and I could hear the guilt in her voice. What's up? What's up? What's up is that you're all hanging out without me. What happened to having my back? It's not like that, Sasha said, but she sounded uncomfortable. It was just a spur-of-the-moment thing. Bullshit. You're avoiding me because of what happened at dinner. Because Ethan threw his little tantrum and made everyone uncomfortable. There was a long pause before Sasha spoke again. Liz, I love you, but maybe Ethan had a point. The way you talked to him that night, in front of everyone, it wasn't cool. So now you're taking his side? I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm just saying that maybe you should think about how your actions affect other people, including your husband. I hung up on her, furious and hurt. How dare they judge me? How dare they act like I was the villain in this situation? But as I sat alone in my living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in around me. The anonymous message, Jamie's rejection, my friend's distance, Ethan's cold politeness. It all felt connected somehow, like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to complete. That night, as Ethan and I lay in our bed like strangers, I tried one more time to bridge the gap between us. Ethan? I whispered into the darkness. Yeah? I'm sorry about dinner. I didn't mean to embarrass you. He was quiet for so long that I thought he had fallen asleep. Finally, he spoke. Are you sorry you did it? Or are you sorry you got caught? The question hung in the air between us, and I realized I didn't know the answer. Friday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor to my office. Margaret Vane stood in my doorway, her silver hair perfectly styled and her expression stern. My mother-in-law had never been one for surprise visits, especially not to my workplace. We need to talk, she said simply. I glanced around the office, aware that my colleagues were watching with interest. Margaret's presence here would definitely fuel more gossip, but I couldn't very well turn her away. Of course, I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. What brings you by? Margaret closed the door behind her and sat down, her purse clutched tightly in her lap. She studied me for a moment before speaking. I've been married for 42 years, Lysandra. I've seen marriages survive affairs, financial ruin, illness, and every other challenge you can imagine. But I've also seen marriages destroyed by selfishness and pride. My defenses went up immediately. If this is about dinner, this is about my son, Margaret interrupted, her voice firm but not unkind, and my granddaughter, and the family that you seem determined to tear apart. I'm not tearing anything apart. I asked Ethan to switch seats, that's all. Margaret leaned forward slightly. That young man, Jamie, how long have you been involved with him? I'm not involved with anyone, I said quickly. He's my trainer, my friend. Lysandra, I wasn't born yesterday. I've watched you these past few months. I've seen how you light up when you talk about him, how you've started dressing differently, how you've been finding excuses to be away from home. And that night at dinner, the way you looked at him. She shook her head. That wasn't friendship. I felt exposed under her steady gaze, like she could see right through all my justifications and excuses. Even if I have feelings for someone else, I haven't acted on them. I haven't done anything wrong. Haven't you? Margaret asked quietly. You've been emotionally unfaithful to your husband. You've been putting another man's needs and wants above your family's. And last week, you humiliated my son in public to get closer to your lover. He's not my lover. Then what is he? The question hung in the air, and I realized I didn't have a good answer. What was Jamie to me? More than a friend, less than a lover, but something that had no name and no acceptable place in my marriage. Ethan is a good man, Margaret continued when I didn't respond. He's been patient with you, perhaps more patient than he should have been. But his patience isn't infinite, Lysandra, and neither is his love. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you, as someone who cares about this family, all of this family, including you. You're at a crossroads right now. You can choose to fight for your marriage, to put in the work to rebuild what you've damaged, or you can continue down this path and lose everything. Margaret stood up, smoothing down her skirt. I hope you make the right choice. For everyone's sake, but especially for Isla's. After she left, I sat alone in my office, her words echoing in my head. I tried to focus on work, but concentration was impossible. Finally, I gave up and decided to leave early. The house was empty when I got home. Ethan was still at work and Isla was at after-school care. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the kitchen island, staring at my phone. I had 17 missed calls from an unknown number and dozens of text messages from various people. My hands shaking, I opened the messages. The first was from Corinne. Liz, call me right now. There are photos. The second was from my mother. Lysandra Marie, what is this nonsense I'm seeing online? The third was from Sasha. Girl, you need to do some serious damage control. This is bad. With growing dread, I opened my Instagram app. The first thing I saw was a tagged post from an account I didn't recognize. It was a collection of photos. Me and Jamie at the gym, at a coffee shop, walking to our cars together after a workout. In every single photo, we looked intimate, like a couple. But the worst part wasn't the photos themselves. It was the caption. Lysandra Vane, HR manager at Morrison Logistics, has been having an affair with trainer Jamie Coulter while married to insurance adjuster Ethan Vane. Thought the community should know what kind of person they're dealing with. The post had been shared dozens of times. The comments ranged from shocked to disgusted to supportive, but they were all talking about me, about my marriage, about my private life. I was scrolling through the comments in horror when I heard Ethan's car in the driveway. I quickly closed the app, but I knew it was too late. If I had seen it, he had definitely seen it. Ethan walked into the kitchen carrying his briefcase and a manila folder. His face was completely expressionless, which somehow seemed worse than if he had been angry. We need to talk, he said, setting the folder on the counter. Ethan, those photos are evidence. he finished quietly, along with your social media posts, text messages, and witness statements from several people who have seen you with Jamie over the past few months. I stared at the folder, my heart pounding. Witness statements? Did you really think no one was paying attention, Lysandra? Did you think you could carry on an emotional affair in a small town and nobody would notice? It's not an affair, I said weakly. You never what? Never touched him? Never kissed him? Never told him things you should have been telling your husband? Ethan opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. Because I have evidence that suggests otherwise. He spread the papers across the counter, like a dealer laying out cards. Screenshots of text messages, printed social media posts, photos, and what looked like official statements from witnesses. This is from your phone records, Ethan said, pointing to one document. 47 phone calls to Jamie's number in the past month, some lasting over an hour. And here, he pointed to another paper, are your credit card statements showing charges at hotels and restaurants that you never mentioned to me. I felt the blood drain from my face. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting myself, Ethan replied calmly, and our daughter, because I knew this day would come, Lysandra. I knew eventually your double life would catch up with you. Double life? That's dramatic, even for you. Ethan looked at me with something that might have been pity. You've been living two separate lives for months, the devoted wife and mother at home, and the single woman pursuing another man everywhere else. You've been lying to me, to Isla, to our friends, and most of all to yourself. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but looking at the evidence spread across our kitchen counter, I realized how damning it all looked, how damning it all was. What do you want from me? I asked quietly. Ethan gathered up the papers and put them back in the folder. I want you to be honest. With me, with yourself, with everyone. I want you to decide what you really want, because I won't keep living like this. And if I choose you, if I end things with Jamie and we work on our marriage, then we'll see if there's anything left to work with, Ethan said. But first, you have to actually choose. No more games, no more manipulation, no more lies. A real choice. He picked up the folder and headed toward the stairs. I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight. Take some time to think about what you really want, Lysandra, because this is your last chance to save our family. As I sat alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of my carefully constructed double life, I realized that Margaret had been right. I was at a crossroads, and the choice I made now would determine everything that came after. The question was, what did I really want? And was I brave enough to be honest about the answer? The weekend that followed was the longest of my life. The anonymous social media posts had spread through our community like wildfire, and I found myself the subject of whispered conversations and pointed stares wherever I went. Saturday morning, I took Isla to her soccer game, hoping that focusing on normal family activities might help restore some sense of normalcy. But even there, I felt the weight of judgment from other parents. Conversation stopped when I approached, and several people who usually made small talk with me suddenly found reasons to be elsewhere. Why is everyone acting weird, Mummy? Isla asked as we walked back to the car after her game. They're not acting weird, sweetheart, I lied. People are just busy. But Isla was more perceptive than I gave her credit for. Are you and Daddy getting divorced? The question hit me like a physical blow. Why would you ask that? Because that's what happened to Emma's parents. First they stopped talking to each other, then her daddy moved to the guest room, then they got divorced, and now Emma has to go back and forth between houses. I knelt down to her level, taking her small hands in mine. Daddy and I are just working through some grown-up problems, okay? Everything's going to be fine. But even as I said the words, I wasn't sure I believed them. That afternoon, while Ethan took Isla to his mother's house, I decided to confront the situation head-on. I drove to Jamie's apartment, determined to talk to him about the photos and figure out how to handle the fallout together. Jamie answered the door, looking harried and uncomfortable. Lysandra, you shouldn't be here. We need to talk, I said, pushing past him into his living room. About the photos, about what people are saying. What people are saying is true, Jamie interrupted, at least partially. We crossed lines, Lissandra. Maybe we never slept together, but we were heading in that direction, and we both knew it. I wanted to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Because he was right. Every text message, every lingering touch, every moment of connection we'd shared had been building towards something that would have destroyed my marriage completely. So what are you saying? I asked. That we should stop seeing each other? I'm saying I should have stopped this months ago before it got this far. Jamie ran his hands through his hair. I never should have let it get to the point where you were asking your husband to move so you could sit next to me. That was fucked up, Lysandra. The blunt assessment stung. I thought you cared about me. I do care about you. That's why I'm telling you to go home and fight for your marriage. Ethan's a good man. You have a beautiful daughter. Don't throw that away for whatever this is between us. And what if I don't want to fight for my marriage? What if I want to be with you instead? Jamie looked at me with something that might have been pity. Then you'd be making a mistake, because I'm not looking for a relationship with a married woman, Lysandra. I never was. This was just fun, excitement, but it's not real life. The rejection was devastating, but more than that, it was clarifying. Jamie had never seen me as anything more than a diversion, a married woman looking for thrills. While I had been building fantasies about a different life, he had been treating our connection as nothing more than a game. I left his apartment feeling hollow and stupid, but also strangely relieved. The fantasy was over. Now I had to deal with reality. Sunday evening, Ethan and I sat down for what I knew would be the most important conversation of our marriage. Isla was asleep upstairs, and the house was quiet, except for the ticking of the clock on the mantel. I ended things with Jamie, I said without preamble. Ethan nodded but didn't look surprised. How do you feel about that? Foolish, I admitted. He made it clear that I was never as important to him as he was to me. I built up this whole fantasy in my head about what we had, but to him I was just a married woman looking for excitement. And what about us? Ethan asked quietly. What about our marriage? I took a deep breath. I want to save it, if it's not too late. It might be, Ethan said, and his honesty was both painful and refreshing. The trust is broken, Lysandra. The respect is gone. I don't know if we can get that back. But you're willing to try. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. I'm willing to try counseling. I'm willing to see if there's anything left worth saving. But there have to be conditions. What kind of conditions? Complete transparency. Your phone, your social media, your whereabouts, everything is open to me until we rebuild trust. You find a new gym, a new trainer, a new routine that doesn't include Jamie or anyone connected to him. And you take responsibility for what you've done. No more blaming me for being controlling or jealous. The conditions were harsh, but I knew I was in no position to negotiate. Okay. And if you ever, and I mean ever, betray my trust again, we're done. No second chances, no explanations, no working it out. I'll file for divorce and fight for full custody of Isla. The threat was delivered calmly, but I could see the steel in his eyes. He meant every word. I understand, I said. We spent the next hour talking about practical matters, counseling appointments, how to handle the social media fallout, how to explain things to Isla. It felt strange to be planning the reconstruction of our marriage with the same detached efficiency we might use to plan a home renovation project. But as we talked, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Maybe we could rebuild. Maybe we could find our way back to each other. Maybe I could learn to be satisfied with the life I had instead of constantly craving something more. It wouldn't be easy. The damage I had caused ran deep, and I knew it would take years to fully repair. But for the first time since that disastrous dinner at Romano's, I felt like we had a chance. The reckoning had been painful, but it had also been necessary. Now came the hard part, living with the consequences of my choices and doing the work to rebuild what I had nearly destroyed. As Ethan and I sat in our living room, making plans for our uncertain future, I realized that this was what real love looked like. Not the exciting rush of a new attraction, but the steady commitment to work through problems together, even when it was difficult and unglamorous. I just hoped it wasn't too late to learn that lesson. 3 months later, I thought we were making progress. Ethan and I had been attending couples counseling twice a week, and while things were still tense between us, we were talking more openly than we had in years. I had found a new gym across town and was working with a female trainer. I had deleted most of my social media accounts and was making an effort to be more present at home. The gossip in our community had largely died down, though I still caught the occasional whispered conversation or sideways glance. Most of our friends had cautiously resumed contact, though the relationships felt different now, more superficial, more guarded. I thought the worst was behind us. I was wrong. The bombshell came on a Tuesday morning in the form of a phone call to my office. The caller identified herself as Sarah Chen, a private investigator hired by Ethan's attorney. "Mrs. Vane, I need to inform you that you're being served with divorce papers. A process server will be at your office within the hour." I nearly dropped the phone. "Divorce papers, but we're in counseling. We're working things out." "I'm just delivering the message, ma'am. The papers will explain everything." I hung up and immediately called Ethan, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried his office, but his secretary said he was in meetings all day and couldn't be disturbed. The process server arrived exactly 1 hour later, a professional-looking woman who handed me a thick envelope with my name typed on the front. I waited until she left before opening it, my hands shaking as I read the documents inside. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Ethan Vane versus Lysandra Vane. But it wasn't just divorce papers. It was a comprehensive legal assault that took my breath away. Ethan was seeking full custody of Isla, citing my emotional instability and extramarital relationship as evidence that I was an unfit mother. He was asking for the house, the majority of our shared assets, and alimony payments from me to him. Attached to the petition were exhibits, dozens of them, screenshots of every text message I had sent to Jamie, photos of us together, credit card statements showing charges at hotels and restaurants, witness statements from friends and neighbors detailing my behavior over the past year. But the most devastating exhibit was a recording. According to the legal documents, Ethan had been recording our conversations for months, including our recent discussions about rebuilding our marriage. In those recordings, I had admitted to the emotional affair, admitted to lying, admitted to prioritizing Jamie over my family. I felt sick as I realized the scope of what Ethan had been doing. While I thought we were working on our marriage, he had been building a legal case against me. Every counseling session, every conversation, every small step toward reconciliation had been part of his strategy to gather evidence for this moment. I called the attorney whose name was listed on the documents, Miller & Shaw, one of the most prestigious family law firms in the state. They informed me that Ethan had been working with them for months, preparing for this divorce filing. "But we've been in counseling," I protested to the lawyer's secretary. "We've been trying to work things out." "I'm sure Mr. Vane's attorney will be happy to discuss that with you during the proceedings," she replied coolly. I left work early and drove home, hoping to confront Ethan directly. But when I arrived, I found that he and Isla were gone. A note on the kitchen counter informed me that they were staying at his mother's house for the foreseeable future, and that I should direct all communication through his attorney. The house felt enormous and empty without them. I walked through the rooms we had shared, looking at family photos and remembering happier times. Had Ethan been planning this even then? Had every smile, every conversation, every moment of apparent progress been a lie? Over the next few days, the full scope of Ethan's preparation became clear. He had been documenting everything for months, Not just my affair, but every argument, every time I had been late coming home, every instance where I had prioritized my own desires over our family's needs. He had witnessed statements from our friends detailing my behavior at social gatherings. He had records of my gym attendance showing how much time I was spending away from home. He even had statements from Isla's teachers expressing concern about changes in her behavior and academic performance during the period of my affair. The most damaging evidence, however, was my own words. The recordings of our private conversations, played back in the sterile environment of a lawyer's office, made me sound selfish, manipulative, and completely unfit to be a mother. In this conversation from March 15th, Ethan's attorney said during our first mediation session, Mrs. Vane admits that she prioritized her relationship with Mr. Coulter over her daughter's needs. She states, and I quote, "Sometimes I need something for myself. I can't just be a mother and wife all the time." Hearing my own words played back in that context was devastating. I had said them during a moment of vulnerability in counseling, trying to explain my motivations. But stripped of context and presented as evidence, they made me sound like a monster. Furthermore, the attorney continued, we have evidence that Mrs. Vane used marital funds to finance her extramarital relationship, including hotel rooms where she and Mr. Coulter met privately. That's not true, I protested. We never... Hotel records show that you booked rooms at the Marriott downtown on 3 separate occasions, Mrs. Vane. Mr. Coulter's cell phone records show he was in the same location during those times. I remembered those afternoons. Jamie and I had met for coffee at the hotel's restaurant to talk privately, away from the gym where we might be seen by other clients. We had never gone to a room together, never done anything inappropriate, but the evidence made it look like we had been having secret rendezvous. This is all circumstantial, my hastily hired attorney protested. There's no evidence of physical adultery. Physical adultery isn't required for a fault-based divorce in this state, Ethan's lawyer replied smoothly. Emotional adultery and marital misconduct are sufficient grounds, and we have overwhelming evidence of both. The mediation session lasted 4 hours and accomplished nothing except to demonstrate how thoroughly Ethan had prepared for this moment. Every argument my lawyer made was countered with documented evidence. Every attempt I made to explain my behavior was met with recordings of my own contradictory statements. As we left the law office, my attorney pulled me aside. Lysandra, I need to be honest with you. This is one of the most comprehensive divorce cases I've ever seen. Your husband has been planning this for a long time, and he has an airtight case. But I'm Isla's mother, I said desperately. They can't just take her away from me. They can if they can prove you're an unfit parent. And right now, they have a strong argument. Your best bet is to negotiate for visitation rights and try to minimize the financial damage. That night, I sat alone in our empty house, reading through the divorce papers again. Every page was a reminder of my failures, every exhibit a monument to my selfishness. But the worst part wasn't the legal language or the financial implications. The worst part was realizing that Ethan was right. I had been an unfit wife and mother. I had prioritized my own desires over my family's needs. I had lied, manipulated, and betrayed the people who loved me most. And now I was going to lose everything. The final hearing came on a cold November morning. Judge Williams's voice echoed, "Marriage dissolved due to my misconduct and emotional adultery. Full custody to Ethan. Supervised visitation for me. The house, assets, even alimony, his." I walked out alone. Ethan left with his mother. Isla was at school, untouched by the wreckage. A text from an unknown number. Saturday visitation, 10 a.m., 6 p.m. Supervised